You've been gaslit into believing that psychiatry and psychology are neutral and always protect families, no matter race. The truth, for decades, these systems have targeted minorities, stigmatized the vulnerable, and torn families apart. We are your whistleblowing shrinks, Dr. Terlin and therapist Jen, and this is the Gaslit Truth Podcast. Today, we have a very special guest. We've got Minister Fred Shaw Jr. with us. He is an author, an activist, a speaker, pastor, and humanitarian. A proud Compton native, he served as the sheriff's deputy, leading youth programs, ran for mayor, has twice held the presidency of the NAACP branches in Compton and in Inglewood, South Bay. As the international spokesperson for the Citizens Commission on Human Rights and the president of the Inglewood, South Bay NAACP, he has fought for decades to protect children, challenge racism in the psychiatric industry, and defend families' rights against forced drugging. His work helped pass the Federal Child Medication Safety Act and has launched a national task force for exposing the industry's long history of stigmatizing and exploiting minorities. Following in the footsteps of his late mother, Marcine Shaw, a fierce human rights advocate, Reverend Shaw remains a tireless voice for justice, education, and equality. Welcome to the show, Fred.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate coming on the show.
Man, I told Jen last night when I was putting together your bio, number one, it was really hard for me to make it smaller because you've done so many cool things. So that was tough. And I said it actually brought me to tears listening to or reading about all the things that you've accomplished in your life because I feel like these humanitarian things are so important. And I had no idea that people were so still grassroots in some of these areas like you have been and you continue to be. So I wanted to start this off with just kind of a statement of gratitude for that. Yeah, and I'm so excited to have you on the show. The one of the biggest things when I came across, because I came across the CCHR and we kind of came across each other on social media actually, which I had no idea was something that even existed, to be honest. But the biggest movement that you have is with children. Is this correct? With children, I saw some stuff on ECT and children is a big push for you, and the drugging of um, our minority community. So wherever you want to start talking, I just want to hear about you and what you've done and what you believe.
Well, before I get into me, I want to thank you guys for having the courage to bring a topic like this to the forefront so that people can get information and learn what's going on actually in the field. We think a lot of times that uh, mental health is our friend, and all of us want better mental health. But the problem is that we're sacrificing patients for the need of profit. And a lot of times people are going into these fields ending up worse than when they went in. And it's actually a system that creates mental health patients for life.
Yes.
Yes, it does. And when can you talk about the advocacy work that you've done with children? Because I think in my world, I'm like, you know what? I think it really starts there because we are creating forever consumers in our youth when we are medicating them because it is a system, a merry-go-round of not being able to get off. So, can you talk about some of the advocacy work that you've done around our children?
Well, to get an idea, though, I'd probably have to set it up a little bit. Like I grew up with very, very powerful and good parents. My mother is known because she was out in the community doing amazing things, but my father created the businesses that allowed her to be able to do that instead of being on a job. And so I grew up looking at people who cared about people, and I cared about people. But growing up in Compton, Willowbrook, Watts, in that area, there are a lot of temptations in life. And there was a situation where we were actually getting ready to do a home invasion because somebody threatened to kill one of my friends. and I was leading it. And when I got into the house, there was a person we were supposed, I'm just telling you the way it is, we were
Mhm.
supposed to take out.
Yep.
And I realized we would have to take out the mother and the girlfriend also. And something within me would not let me give the order. And when we got through that incident, 2 weeks later, my mother and father took me out to dinner, and they were telling me how proud they were that I'd been able to get through the gangs and didn't get involved and things like that. And I started shaking. And I realized if I had parents like these and almost threw my life away, for God saving me, I would basically give my life to helping children. And all of the work that I do come out of that. And because a lot of kids don't have a chance, so every single time we do something that make it more difficult for them to survive or get through the system or be able to be themselves, we are, actually going against their nature. We're helping them to succumb. And so for me to do the work that I do, be it Sheriff Athletic League, the World Literacy Crusade, another organization we started. We had chapters around the world teaching kids how to read because we discovered that part of the reason that you're having this crime is because people are illiterate. And all of the different programs and stuff I did, it was simply because I felt that kids need to have a chance. And once they get into the system too deep, there's nothing I can do for them. But before they get there, I wanted to be on the crime prevention side instead of the crime apprehension side because I was a sheriff deputy. So I saw that every day people come into jail just to repeat, and I felt that we should do something. So that led me to opening up group homes for boys dealing with probation kids. It was like trying to do something about the situation. That's all.
That's not just all. He's like, "That's all. That's all it was." And I'm like, "It's so much more." And I think you're a pretty humble guy when you're talking about the things that you've done. It's to you, it was all about finding the root cause. Like, what is the root cause? And literacy became one of the or illiteracy became one of the root causes that stood out to you. Like, if we're going to give these kids a chance, we have to teach them how to read as a basic thing, right? That's pretty profound. And so, when in your life did you figure out psychiatric medication was becoming one of the root cause issues for children and them not succeeding? When did that light bulb? Because there's always this light bulb moment, when you connect something.
My youngest son was diagnosed with dyslexia, and everything was going fine. Of course, we were going through with young parents in our 20s where we're having, asking ourselves all the questions and stuff. And they made a mistake and said he needs to go see a psychiatrist. My mother immediately said, "Don't let them label your child. It will follow him the rest of his life." But the
Hmm.
mistake that they actually made is when they said they wanted to send him to a psychiatrist, I said, "For what?" And they said to help him with his self-esteem. I said, "That's my job. I'm his father. I'll help him with his self-esteem." And a friend of mine took me to a place where they dealt with all kind of kids, and they had him doing his letters in clay and things over and over, and he wanted to give up. He said, "Dad, I'm gonna tell." I said, "If you will just hang in there another 2 weeks with me, I'll let you quit if you want to." And one day he came home and he said, "Dad, I don't have it no more." And I said, "What?" He said, "I can see my letters. I know my numbers and letters and things." And I asked myself a question: how many kids are being diagnosed simply because the system don't know how to handle them? It's nothing necessarily wrong with the kid. There's something wrong with the approach. And at the tutoring place that my son was at, I remember the day he said, "Dad, I can read perfectly now." That's all a parent needs.
Yeah. So for you, I love what you just said, right? You said there's nothing wrong with the kid.
It's the approach.
It's the approach. And Terry and I align with that wholly, right? Even as therapists who diagnose people, or maybe don't diagnose as much as we should because we are not, we
We
do not
hate it.
like, we hate labels, period. Really, truly. But that idea, right, for you sparked something. So this idea of here's a child, here's where they're at in their development. There's nothing wrong with them, but the system wants to put a label on them, put a medication, most likely, right? Recommend that, put that into them so that we can medicate them into compliance so that they can sit still longer, focus more often, be able to do all these things that are required in some kind of level of a standard like educational environment. When in reality, this wasn't a trait, it was more of a state that your son was in. So you use a different intervention and got him through what he needed to get through.
Look, under the system that we have now, I would have been on medication. Probably Dr. Martin Luther King would have been on medication. Muhammad Ali most definitely would have been on medication.
Yes.
It's like, you know, sometimes all we need is the programs for the kids to burn off the energy. I have a very smart granddaughter, but when she used to come over here, I used to sneak her ice cream, and we could basically count down before she started bouncing off the walls.
Yep.
I mean, like there's things. Is this girl is something to behold? She was getting started at 5 years old and stuff, but you can you give the kids frosty flakes in the morning and all these sugar snack cereals. They go to school, and then you could just start counting down,
Yep.
and here it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. So
So
another
I
example, right, of here's something you could do different, parents, change a kid's diet. That's an intervention versus, right, taking them to a provider, getting them labeled, getting them medicated, right? We can maybe just change their nutrition and you might actually see something different.
At one time, I read a study that said 70% of the children, if not a little bit more, could get rid of ADHD by changing their diet.
Diet. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's 100.
And the same thing if you actually gave them a very rigorous study program. And you can change all of these things. See, me and you, if we're watching a television program or we're sitting in a meeting and we don't like it, we just get up and leave. Well, a child in school can't do that.
No.
Everybody makes him sit down. He can't, if he's
Yep.
lost or if it's too slow for him. Either way, he gets caught in that because he's got to move at the pace of everybody else. And that can be very frustrating. If one of the most important things we found with the World Literacy Crusade is the understanding of words. If a kid doesn't understand the words that you're using when you're talking to him, it's almost like you're speaking in Spanish. And so, how does he get from under that frustration and not being able to follow along? So, things like tutoring, which seem to be eliminated in our schools, I'm not going to swear to that because I haven't checked. Those
You're
type of
right.
tutoring and stuff, they're being replaced with all of this counseling and people asking you, are you depressed? And yeah, if you missed the meal last night, you might be depressed. In fact, let me tell you a little thing real quick on that. I was in South Africa. I was speaking with one of the kings, and he said that the children are being labeled ADHD, and the only thing wrong with them is they're coming to school hungry, and most of them didn't have enough sleep at night,
Yep.
and
Yep.
they're being ADHD. So you would give a kid a pill before we would give them a sandwich. And this is going on here in America. It's going on all over the world. If we look right now, there's probably about 6.1 million children on psychiatric drugs. That is the size of the Los Angeles Coliseum, which fits 100,000 people, 61 times with nothing but children on psychiatric drugs in this country. That's terrible. And something has to happen on that. Well, the thing was that in South Africa, I was talking to one of the kings, and he was telling me that the only thing wrong with the children is that they're coming to school hungry and haven't had enough sleep, and they were being labeled ADHD. One of the things that people don't know is that Ritalin is very similar to cocaine, and Adderall is similar to meth. And so you're giving that drug to children. They're in the same category and everything. And when you look at the health index and all of that stuff, and you're giving that to babies. And then later on, when they're 16 and 17 and they start experimenting, the body seems to recognize cocaine and meth and those things real quick. And the next thing you know, you got a child that's an addict who may have been set up, and I'm gonna say may because I'm not a scientist, so I do read the information and stuff, but which may set them up to be addicts and they're teens and as young adults.
And here we're saying it started from the symptoms that the child was displaying, starting from the idea that they missed meals. They weren't properly, like, right, possibly
Fed.
nourished with food, right? So that's one factor that makes somebody vulnerable to present in such a way that then leads to, well, this is an ADHD thing.
This is a neurological disorder because
Yes.
that's what they're saying ADHD is now. It's a neurological,
Yes.
you're born with it disorder. When really, and Jen and I firmly believe this, like nutrition is key. I think a lot of these kids could be out of the ADHD net with proper nutrition.
Nutrition, um, being taught how to study properly,
Mhm.
exercise always helps burn the sugars and things or whatever's in the body that might be causing what they call imbalances. But the truth of the matter is, they don't have a clue what they're talking about. Not that I'm smarter than they are, or whatever, but when you tell me that a sign that a baby is possibly mentally ill is because you pick the baby up, and if the baby looks away, that is a possible sign of mental illness. And I asked the psychiatrist, well, if that's true, where's the mother standing when you pick him up?
Oh,
Because that's where the child is going to look. Where's the father standing? That's where that's their lifeline. Even children are smart enough to know where the lifeline is. So if a stranger, picks them up, the child is going to look away. They put kids in foster homes, probation homes.
Yes.
Let's go with the foster home. So
Yeah,
you
I want
take
you
a
to talk. I want you to talk about this, Fred, because this is a big. If you can speak to the foster home piece to this and the probation piece to this, because it ties right into on your website these national. And we have to talk about this because this is really. I mean, you're such an advocate. People need to hear this. 3 national resolutions, 2 from the NAACP and 1 from the National Caucus of Black State Legislators, supported children's rights to not be subjected to coercive psychotropic drugs and to stop the psychotropics in the foster care as well as like the electroshock piece. So talk about this within foster care, please.
Well, the thing is when you look into the foster care system and probation system and all of these so-called juvenile justice type systems, they mass drug the children. You
Mhm.
know, they line them up in the morning a lot of times, and here they are out there making these kids take their meds before their day even gets started. I can tell you a story. on how we got one kid in particular when we had our own probation homes, and we were known for taking the kids that everybody else couldn't handle, and I guess that was part of my mission in life, and that's what we wanted. We get a call that this kid is refusing to take his medication, and so I go to meet with the kid, and this is all true right here. I walk in, I see the kid, and I said, "Do you want to talk to me?" He said, "Not really." I said, "If I got asked you for 5 minutes, would you give me that?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "They say you have ADHD." He said, "Yeah, that's what they say." I say, "What's the longest you ever talked to a girl on the phone?" He looked at me. He said, "Hours." I said, "Did she become your girlfriend?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Okay. What's the longest you played Nintendo?" That's what they were playing back then. "Hours, all day." "Do you ever win?" "Yeah." "Have you ever read a full comic book?" "Yeah." "Ever played a full game of basketball?" "Yeah." "Were you able to stay in tune with what was going on with your teammates and stuff?" He said, "Yeah." I said, Let me ask you a question. If I took you to my group home, would you want to come?" He said, "Yeah." Because just on the questions that I asked him. So here come the social worker, the psychologist, everybody coming out. What kind of questions were those? I said,
The ones that
well,
matter.
Real
Those are
life
the
ones.
questions that matter. Yes.
Yep.
I said, it proves to me that he can pay attention to anything he's interested in.
Yes.
He can come with me. This guy went on to become a professional bodyguard, all kind of stuff, right out of my group home. But we didn't make him take drugs. And he was smart enough to realize the reason they were giving him drugs was to control him. That's why he wouldn't take them.
Mhm.
It
Yeah.
became
He
a
was
power. Yep, it was
see,
power. Yep,
see,
100%.
we
Yeah.
never had a problem with him. He never got in a fight in our group home. He never violated the rules. He went on to become a bodyguard, celebrity bodyguard for some people and stuff. It's like if you give the kids a chance and you address them properly, if you know what you're doing, you know, they don't know. I'm telling you, they're supposed to be the experts. Now, they can give you a lot of technical stuff. But I was at the Korean consulate with my mother one time, and a psychiatrist was holding court about at risk youth. And everybody's all tied into him, and he's talking about at risk youth and these people don't have the chance and all of that. And I'm sitting there and I haven't said a word. And finally, he couldn't take it. And he said, "Well, what do you think? You haven't said a word since you've been here." I said, "I really don't think you know what you're talking about." I said, "Answer this. The kid sitting on the bus stop that gets shot when there's a gang shooting, isn't that kid at risk? Isn't the kid that takes a knife to school because the bullies are beating him up at school,
Yeah.
isn't he at risk?" I said, "So which kid are you talking about that's at risk? How come you don't see that the environment creates a risk to all the kids?" And people started, And I
Yeah.
said, "I don't have a degree." I said, "I don't have a PhD. This was the first time I said it. I got it from a friend of mine. "I don't have a PhD. I have a PhD. I'm not here doing it." And
I
so
love that.
know, I know what's going on with these kids because experience is an educator itself.
Oh, yes. Like that's yes, 100%. Experience,
Yeah.
subjective experience. I always tell people, Fred, I will say to them, I'm like, listen, the doctors are the one that got you in this shit in the first place when we're working with clients that are so medicated, right? And trying so hard to change their life, and people put so much stock in the doctorate and in the white coat and in the licensure, right? And I'm like, shit, that got you in problem in the first place. Like that's why you're here in front of us, right? But I want to ask you something, okay? And I'm probably going to mess this up in how I'm asking this question. So if I'm not using the right like terminology here, just I don't know, jump in and just be like, all right, Jen, seriously, here's what you call this, right? Here's the PC way to say this. Okay. I want to ask you a question about this movement that has occurred over the past few years about bringing mental health resources. And if you guys are not on YouTube right now watching me air quote all this shit, I'm air quoting a lot right now, okay? But bringing bringing mental health resources into disparaged communities. And this idea that, okay, you're talking Inglewood, you're talking Compton, okay? Significant minorities within these communities, right? Have you found that the mental health resources that get the funding or things that get poured into these communities actually does more damage because mental health resources equates to psychiatry, possibly like more counseling and labeling that doesn't actually help the problem at hand? Like, can you speak to that at all?
Well, I will just say this. Um, One of the most dangerous things, and I'm gonna be real, like you being real. One of the most dangerous things that you can take a group rooted in eugenics and racism and then put them over a group of people to correct the problem. You know, when
Okay.
we look at some of the most, everybody was fighting at one time. Now, I'm an ex-law enforcement officer, so I'm not anti-police. But everybody was fighting the fact of police brutality and stuff like that. But they didn't understand that psychiatry is far more racist
And
than
brutal.
you know. At the time George Floyd was killed, with the knee to the neck and stuff, a boy named Cornelius Fredericks was killed in a mental institution. I think he was about 14 or maybe 14 for throwing a sandwich at an orderly. And they put him in a position and held him until he died. And he couldn't breathe either. And there's been kids 6 and 7 years old held down by big orderlies who never came out of it alive. And then you're going to take this same system and you're going to help in the name, you're
Yep.
going to hurt people in the name of help, and then say how we're doing you, when this is not. We don't have mental health in this country. We have mental control in this country. We give kids drugs to control their behavior, not to make them smarter, brighter, quicker thinkers. We don't give them those drugs to do it. That we give them the drugs to control them. And like the Godfather said in the Godfather, they're, give it to the dark people. They're animals anyway. Let them lose their souls. I mean, that's kind of the whole thing that you got going on right there in the field of mental health. And they're coming into our community, and every single program leads to the drugs.
Right,
And
right. So explain to people when you say eugenics, okay? Because some people may not understand this idea of modern day eugenics.
well,
What are you
the thing,
saying?
it's just simply the fact that it's based in a system that certain races are inferior to other races, and some are superior to races, and you lock society into that type of thing, and this one has an advantage. I mean, we had the book, was that the bell curve, years ago, where that was the whole premise of a book about the superiority of one group over another group. And I've been around all type of people all my life. I played sports. I was a good athlete, and different people, and we played against all types of kids. And some white kids could shoot the lights out, and some, you can think that people got superiority and stuff like that. But if you told me, well, you can't have Kevin Durant, you got to have Larry Bird, you think that I'm gonna cry? It's like,
Larry
no,
Bird.
no. So the whole idea of this superior, superiority thing is a fallacy. All you can look through Black history and you see people who had far less that did a lot. And it's like it's just thinkers. People are spiritual beings and they can think. That's my viewpoint. And I don't know if the body, if we can really prove that the body has certain genetic advantages in certain people or not, but I do know environments can create you to develop certain skills. If I come up in a community that plays a lot of basketball, I can tell you that the kids coming out of that community will be pretty good basketball players. But if your community play a lot of football, then we're going to probably see in your community kids that come out of there that's really good football players. I mean, it's not, in
Yeah.
my opinion, it especially doesn't have anything to do with the way we think, because you can take a Chinese kid and put him in Compton, and he'll grow up and he'll speak perfect English for the environment of Compton. Or you could take a Black kid, put him in Mexico, and he'll grow up speaking Spanish. And so the mind develops wherever we are.
Mm-hmm.
So this whole idea that we need to go into this community because these people are mentally, no, change the environment, create the opportunities that are needed, educate the kids properly, get the drugs out of the community, get the crime out of the community. This is not a pitch for the president. It's just get the crime out.
I'd probably
Make it,
vote for you right now.
Give him a
Actually.
megaphone, damn it.
you know, I mean, I mean,
Yeah.
we sit here and there are certain things that make sense. And then there's people, oh, your program is, I meant to say, it's such a good name, Gaslight. I mean, we got people doing, uh, people are telling us that we don't need help with the crime in the community. Well, those people speaking are losing the dead children.
Yeah.
See? So I'm just saying, we have to be able to have common sense. We have to bring the resources into the community, not just the little, help the poor children. Get in here and make sure kids need get the education they need. How come mothers get to sit on welfare? So when their children are in school, how come they're not in school? I mean, look, let's just elevate people. And you'll
Yeah.
find that all of these things of depression and all of these things will disappear as people become more and more successful. You know,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
you
agree.
know.
When you said get drugs out of these communities, I'm thinking get psych meds as drugs out of the community too. Because here, systemically, the problem is one of the problems is psychiatric medication for the impoverished is typically free. It is a free thing. Like when you don't have to go and there was once upon a time in the state that we're in that it was like a $2 copay to see a therapist if you were on like Medicaid, right? If you're on public
Mm.
assistance. That they did away with that. And now also medication is free for people too. That includes psychiatric medication. So when Jen and I talk to people and we're like, better food, better programs, what all these things. Well, that takes money and people don't have money. So what is the easiest thing for them to access? Free psychiatric medication. Free,
Right.
Well,
right?
Right.
well, the kids know because they'll take at school and crush up meth
Yeah.
and rip and snort it.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So parents don't know. The
No.
doctors pretend not to know, but the kids know.
The
Right.
kids
You
know.
know,
Mhm.
yeah.
We underestimate how smart kids are
So
all the
this
time.
brings a little twist in here to this next piece, and I don't want to go on a rant because I want you to be able to speak about this, Fred. So I'm gonna try to keep it simple on my end. So Terry and I, for years, worked in the prison system within the
Mhm.
state that we live in, and I something that we now that we do not work for the prison system anymore, that I personally greatly struggled with was most of the individuals that came into the prison system. I worked in 4 different male prison systems and in a female one. They came in on psychiatric medication. 3/4 of them, to be fair on an estimate, had a history of taking those medications, and many of which started those medications when they were quite young. It was very rare that we had people come in that for the first time in their adult life, they were going to start a psych med. And there's all this discussion about the revolving door and recidivism and all the things, right? Okay, but something that I always noticed was I was taken back a bit by the amount and the time frame by which these people, individuals within the prison system, had medications in their lives. Many of them started when they were very, very young. Many of them came from very poor communities. I mean, we did not have significant amounts of inmates coming from affluent communities. Okay.
Mhm.
There were some, don't get me wrong, but, and so you watch this trajectory of somebody's story starting when they were really young. And a lot of times there were behavioral issues, ADHD, ODD, all these diagnoses that we don't even give to people anymore, right? Because they were oppositional, because they were defiant, because they couldn't pay attention. And these meds stayed with them for so incredibly long. Then they come into the prison system and we continue those meds. We add some, we take some away. But like 75% to 80% of the people that were in these institutions are medicated. They leave those institutions medicated. And part of the thing that I always questioned, one is people weren't really getting better. Okay. Two, nobody wants to touch the discussion of recidivism having anything to do with psychiatric medications. Like nobody
Well,
wants to touch that. So I'm kind of curious to know your lens on this, Fred, and if you have any opinion on this.
well, first of all, your observation is right on point. Um, this is what I'm talking about when I say they set these kids up as children. When we ran our probation homes for boys, 24-hour residential care facility, we wouldn't let our kids be put on medication. We we lost something like $64,000 a month in funds because we refused to drug the children
My God.
because we knew what the outcome would be.
Mm.
We had a kid, and I'm gonna give you this story. This kind of sums it up. I'd say 16 years old, so about 6'2", maybe 3, had this scowl on his face, and everybody was scared of him. They brought him to my group home. I walked through the door. I'm 6'6", 260 at the time. And the first thing he asked me, "You want a box?" And I laughed at him and I said, they won't let me box you, but I could take you out on the basketball court. We go out on the basketball court. He wasn't as good as me. I was at one time almost pro. And but this kid had strength. He was quick. He was so I now on this thing, they wanted him to go to a continuation school for bad boys, and they wanted him on medication. I took him to a local high school, and I took him to the football coach. And the football coach do a couple little slight drills and said, "Bring him to me tomorrow." Now here's a kid that was supposed to go to continuation school for bad boys and be on drugs. He graduated from the high school. He went to USC and played 4 years of football there and
Wow.
ended up playing in the NFL. This is a kid that was supposed to be on drugs. This is a kid that wasn't supposed to make it because somebody, myself, thought enough of this kid to see what he was capable of. This guy now, I think he does nutritional things with people and train people and stuff. But this was a kid that wasn't supposed to make it. That is how these drugs are set up. And this is how they snatch the future of the people because we opened up talking about making people mental health patients for life. We, the whole thing is to keep these people on these drugs, and what they will not do, and you can use your show to do it, and I'm not finished doing it, they will not investigate the connection between all of these violent crimes and stuff and the psychiatric drugs. We just had this shooting in Minnesota. That's so Minneapolis. It's so bad. But nobody's asked, is there a connection between that and the psychiatric drugs? What about Las Vegas? What about all these places where these dudes, people are doing these heinous crimes? How many of these kids are on the psychiatric drug? Oh, they're on the drugs because they have a tendency to do this. Well, the drugs didn't stop it. So what good is the drug
Right.
if
Right.
you still get the same outcome?
Hmm.
It just
As long as we
blinds.
keep viewing the drugs only as treatment, that's the thing. Like these psychiatric medications are only viewed as treatment. It couldn't possibly be a cause. Because it's treatment,
Well,
right?
I accuse the top psychiatrist in Los Angeles County of drugging children in these foster care and probation, all these systems, with less than 7 minutes of evaluation, and he could not deny it.
Correct.
No.
He
Because you
could
can't.
not.
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
Be, and the guy that was head of Children and Family Services said, "How did you know that?" Once the meeting was over, he said, "How did you know that?" I said, "I didn't, but it was faster than that by how quick he agreed." Because what they were doing is they take a child out of a home and he doesn't know his parents, where his parents are. He doesn't know what's going on. And they put him with strangers and then they walk in and ask him, do he feel depressed?
Yes, I would feel depressed.
All of us would.
Yeah.
Yes.
See, in normal behavior and they're labeling it mental illness. That's why I brought up the thing about the child, how sign of mental illness was a baby looking away when you pick him up. Well, where's the mother standing? They're taking normal reactions, labeling them mental illness, and then getting paid for it. And with all of the drug. And then when you take the kid off the drug, he will react just like any other addict. Just because he's 4 years old don't mean he doesn't go through the stages of being an addict when he's been on these drugs. So then he starts acting out.
Yep.
So
Goes
his
through
body
withdrawal.
can get yeah. And
Mhm.
then they give him more drugs. And then the mother said, oh, he does need these drugs. You created the condition that made him need that drug.
Right.
And that's what we're looking at.
Thank you for putting that together for me with the whole foster care situation. Um, I've thought the same thing that the kids are over medicated, but I didn't put it together that, and this makes so much sense because the prison system was the same way. You come into the prison system, you get an assessment, right? Like, so you take a
Mhm.
kid who's been torn away from his parents, doesn't know if he'll ever see his parents or his siblings or anybody that he knows, stick them in a group home environment where everybody there is sad, not knowing what's going on, a little bit hyper vigilant, wouldn't you think? And they immediately get assessed. And of course, they're going to pop for multiple
Mhm.
um, mental health conditions, right? Particularly depression. That makes sense to me. It's situational. You're putting a kid in an environment that he has no idea what is going to happen to him or where anybody in his life is. And he's grieving. He's grieving loss, um, and just, the trauma of it all, right? I guess I never even put it together that immediate assessment. It's similar to like taking somebody off a psychiatric medication and the next week you're going to assess them for their baseline.
Yeah.
Like that's not even
No.
an accurate
No.
assessment.
Not at all.
Like that is not that kid's baseline at all.
Mhm.
That's you're assessing someone in the middle of a traumatic war essentially and saying, "Do you have trauma?" Well, of course, you're in the middle of a war. You have trauma right now, right? You are
Right.
responding appropriately to the environmental input that's been
Mhm.
put in front of you, And so that to me that was simple yet profound, to all the times that we assess people are right in the middle of something terrible that has happened to them and then we say, "This is
Right.
you. This
Yep.
is your label for the rest of your life." By the way, it will never go away starting in childhood. How do you expect these kids to react? Like how I would expect everybody there to be sad or, for every behavior has a
Yes.
purpose. So if they're acting
Confused,
confused,
depressed,
if
issues
they
with
are out of
appetite,
control, there's a
right? Like
reason. Yeah.
oppositional behaviors because you're acting out, poor concentration, brain fog, like
Are you kidding me?
lethargy, low energy. Like these are all the things that happen to us when we have to adjust to something in our environment, right? Like this is the shit that happens. No different than inmates coming into the correctional system. We just took all of you moms because 80% of the women were mothers. We stripped you of your environment. We took you of your kids. We removed you from your life. And
Let,
now here you go.
let
Like
me tell you,
I
let me
can't.
tell you a story. I was 17 and we come from a basketball game and I was racing another person who ended up being a brother-in-law in the future from that incident. And I got a little smart because my mother was a community activist and the cop was kind of mistreating. He was trying to show off for other cops. We didn't know it. So anyway, we ended up going to jail. And while we're at jail, we're laughing and stuff because the officer is trying to search me and David Greenwood, who just passed away. Rest his soul. Great player, played in the NBA and everything. The guy was real short. Greenwood was taller than me. He was 6'9". He's standing on the bench trying to search, and we're laughing and stuff. And the lieutenant walked in and he says, "You see those Crips back there?" And we said, "Yeah. If you don't shut up, I'm gonna put you back there with those Crips." And I said, "If you put us back there with the Crips and we win, would you let us go without calling our parents?" The next thing I know, my mother and father are at the station. And the guy says, anybody that's more afraid of the Crips more afraid of their parents than the Crips. Well, the thing is, and when I was growing up, our parents in those days had the cure for ADHD.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm not, I'm
Yes.
not, I'm not trying to say punish kids and whip kids. I'm just telling you, in those days, when they came into the schools and told us, literally did this and told us we did not have to get spankings from our parents anymore. And if we did, call the police. And they basically was separating parents from kids. And yeah, we want to protect kids, but at the same time, here come the Crips and all of these gangs on the heels of this. Because if you don't have any type of penalty for when you're misbehaving, you will just keep misbehaving.
Right.
So all of us who had parents, and in those times, everybody on my street had two parents in the home, we knew to do what our parents told us to do. When they said be quiet, you were quiet. I see kids now cursing their parents out in the store and all this stuff, and the parents don't know what to do. Well, my parents was able to come get him because he's not gonna run this house. Now, the thing is, there has to be a balance. Some things you have to be able to do in the kid's life. You know, what if he's running into the street? He needs to be able to hear that voice, and when he hears that voice, he needs to freeze. What if he gets stuck on an electrical cord in some water? What if when see we can? But when they did that, it was not to help and protect the kids. It was to set it up that the kids would have to come to mental health in the future, and they can make money on these kids.
Yeah.
When I said earlier, they harm in the name of help. Yeah, there are parents who have always, to this day, that go overboard and hurt children and stuff. And those people need to be dealt with. But at the same time, parents need to be able to run their house because I knew my father said, if you don't know your multiplication this evening, me and you going to have a talk. And I knew him. It's like it's simple.
You knew what that meant.
That was it. That was all you needed. You're like, yep, I'll learn them. No problem. Don't want to have that kind of talk.
So the proper balance of everything is important. And so that we can move on and do that. So, but I thought the fact that here were kids that were more afraid of their parents than they were of the Crips, was an indication that something good was going on in that home, because
Mhm.
that was the kind of respect we had for our parents.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting when you talked about taking parents away from children in respect of disabling parents, right, from raising their children essentially. Then the gangs come in and they end up raising the kids because the parents can't anymore. So it's like the gang violence stuff like comes in and reparents those children. And we're cool with that. Not really. We're not cool with that, but because you've disabled parents in the home, that is a now a risk factor that could be happening in some of these communities, if I'm hearing you correctly on that.
Right. Right. It's breaking up again now, and
Oh,
I can't
sorry.
hear you that well.
Oh,
Um, but
did you
no,
hear me,
no, but
Jen?
it's but
I did. I heard you. Yeah.
we have to.
Oh, no. I think we lost
I'm
you
here.
again, Fred. Oh, you're here. Okay. Hey, I have one
Oh,
last question for you, and then I want to wrap this up. How did you get involved with the Citizens Commission on Human Rights? How did that happen for you?
when a friend of mine led me to them, um, all during that time that my son was being diagnosed with dyslexia, and I was looking for solutions, and they was trying to get him to a psychiatrist. My friend said, "No, you need to know this information before you turn your kid over to these people." And then when I went and I seen what the materials and what was going on and stuff like that, I knew it was an organization that I needed to be a part of, because I saw that as part of education and things like that as part of the problem that we were facing in the Black community. And these systems were ganging up on us. See, when you put those two together, education and mental health, then you labeled the kid, and now the teacher doesn't have to teach the kid because he has a label. The parents don't have to enforce learning because he has a label. And so, everything excuses him and lets him skate by. And when we found our group homes, we found that we didn't have a kid we couldn't teach to read. We couldn't have a kid that we couldn't teach grammar or how to multiply. It was just doing it on a step by step basis to where he knew one step before he was taken to the next step. So if a kid doesn't know multiplication, he's going to be confused. If he can't divide, he's going to be confused when he does algebra. And so the school system, with all of its wisdom, didn't know that you got to make sure that one step is firmly known before you take a kid to the next step. Well, when in the probation home setting, we could take them step by step, make sure they know what was going on before they went to the next step, and we started seeing remarkable results in these kids.
I love this. This was such a wonderful conversation, and again, heartfelt. I appreciate everything that you've done in your lifetime. You've done so many things. I would love to just sit down and just listen to your stories. Like you're a historian, and I think it's amazing what you've done. And please keep bringing the truth and advocating for our children. Yeah, my mom
If you
heart.
need me for anything, I really like you guys. You ask the right questions. You're aware of what's going on. If you need me for this or any other subject that concerns the Black community, you just call me.
I will. We will. We'll have you on again, Mr. Shaw, for sure, 100%. I want to read a statement here for our listeners. This is our final push for MedWatch. The deadline is in October. So if you have been harmed by SSRI or SNRI withdrawal, your story matters. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. We are calling on you to submit your experience to the FDA's MedWatch system. Let's make it impossible for them to ignore us. Join us in submitting your story. Go to antidepressantinfo.org That is another episode of the Gaslit Truth podcast. If you've hung out with us this far, thank you for being here. And thank you, Reverend Shaw. I look forward to talking with you in the future. And please, everyone, like, comment, share, subscribe, and send us your Gaslit Truth at the Gaslit Truth Podcast at gmail.com.
Thank you, guys.